I've been learning new things, just going through the first parts of your book. And, of course, today we're going to talk about a real important topic, namely the Council of Jerusalem and in Acts 15. Because as Catholics, when we read it, we see that Peter's the one who decides the issue of Acts 15. But as you know, the big response from non-Catholics is, no, it isn't Peter. It's actually James.
Yeah, that's the most common comeback that I actually deal with that in my book. And so the idea is that James is the leader. Two reasons are often given to substantiate or justify that claim. One of which is that the imperative mood is used for the command listen. When James says, brethren, listen, the Greek akousate, to me there in verse 13, the imperative mood is used. It's inferred from that James is leading the council with supreme, not just leading the council proceedings, but having a supreme authority at the council over and above Peter. The second reason that's often given to justify the claim that James is the leader here and having more authority than Peter is that he says in verse 19, therefore my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God. And so for these two reasons, it's argued that James is exercising a primary leadership role there at the council that supersedes that of Peter. So that's the common comeback. Now, as we begin to respond, Gary, as I point out in my book, we could take that first reason first and begin to address that. Just because the imperative mood is used in Greek, it doesn't necessarily follow that James has authority over the group.
The question of the council is whether or not Gentiles need to be circumcised and follow the law of Moses, right?
Yeah.
And if you just erase Peter's words and you just go to James, and James' response is that, Amos says that the nations will stream into the church and that you should refrain from unlawful marriage, eating blood, that type of stuff. It doesn't answer the question of the council, does it?
Good point. Good
point. It just kind of hangs out nowhere.
That's an excellent insight, Gary. If you take out Peter's declaration there, the theological dispute is not settled.
Yeah.
And so it's clear that his response there in verses 7 through 11 does indeed settle the issue, which Luke tees up there in verse 6 by saying there was no small debate. And so the apostles and the elders that are convening there to consider the matter, they're not all in agreement, and they're not all just sitting around just saying, oh, here's what I think, here's what you think. This was like a big deal, and right. Luke's narration brings that out and conveys the tense nature or the urgency of trying to settle this thing. And it's Peter's, as I mentioned, Peter's speech that does so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great response. In fact, reading your book, you came up with one that I don't think I've ever encountered, at least I never noticed, and that was from, I think it was Geisler and Nix, where that Peter didn't convene the council, and this council was a product of Antioch. Maybe you can explain that one a little bit.
Yeah, Geisler and McKenzie bring this up that, if Peter had been the first pope, they write, he would have convened the assembly in Jerusalem. Since he doesn't convene it, or at least there's no evidence that he did, he must not have been the first pope. The problem here is that the objection only works on a false assumption. We don't believe that the pope has to convene a council, right? You don't have to convene a council in order to be the pope, right? So just because, it doesn't seem to be that Peter called the council, just because Peter doesn't assemble everyone and call it, it doesn't follow from that he's not the first pope, because you don't have to be the pope in order to call the council, right? You can have others agreeing to bring everybody together to consider the matter. What counts is what Peter says concerning the issue being discussed among those who are assembled together there. the apostles and the elders. So this comeback just simply operates on a false assumption. And by exposing the false assumption and showing how it is a false assumption, it has no persuasive force. And even to this day, we recognize that a council can be convened by someone other than the Pope and has been done so throughout church history. What matters is whether the Pope confirms what has been proposed at the council, or what the Pope might teach concerning issues about the council. So you could have the council fathers and all the members of the council propose a teaching on an issue, and the Pope just simply puts his stamp of approval on it, thereby making it his own teaching. Or you can have the Pope himself sending a letter or teaching at the council and declaring the matter, like Peter does in Acts chapter 15. So that's how I respond to that comeback. With a few more details there in written form in the book.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that was my next question, was whether there's councils that weren't convened by the Pope. So in a way, Jerusalem's almost like Council of Florence, right? Where the Pope has an encyclical and the Council Fathers basically give their thumbs up,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, very cool stuff.